and let's begin. All right, so here we are on lesson 7, how to create your personal religion. And today we are talking about worship. All right, so I have updated the idea and the definition of agencies of personal religion. I went back to listen to last week's class, and Jalen had gave a definition or understanding of agencies based on how he was learning it in his semester of communications. And it enabled me, it opened up something for me throughout this week. So I went back to reword and add a new understanding of agencies. So I added a new definition from the last 3 times. So today we're starting again. Every week we're starting with a new understanding, a new evolutionary process. Agencies today are the techniques that supply favorable conditions for spiritual growth. I really love that. I thought that was very simple and very well stated. It's the means in which we enables one to maintain a living spiritual connection with true spiritual forces. And it's also the means one can distribute the blessings of their growth to others. And definition of spiritual growth is awakening to one's real needs. Okay. And what we mean by that is we understand we have physical needs, but we also understand there are real spiritual needs that we need. In essence, we need meaning, we need purpose. There is so much that can get accomplished in your life if you feel you have meaning and purpose. If you are committed to being the next best rapper in Atlanta, right? And you are so passionate and you know that that's your purpose, you know that's your existence for being, you'll be willing to be homeless for a few weeks as you pursue that craft, if you know that's your meaning and your purpose. If you don't have that meaning, that purpose, and you find yourself homeless, it can be an extremely painful, discomforting experience. But if you can add a meaning as to why you become homeless and why you're sacrificing, all of a sudden it becomes a transcendent experience of you're doing what you need to do to sleep in your car. So with meaning and purpose, our human nature, our human strivings become even more enthusiastic. So what we really need is purpose and value, meaning. And that's what spiritual growth is about. It really helps you awaken to what really you need. The other aspect of spiritual growth is the discernment of meanings. And we're going to give more about that. There's nothing that I feel like is, for me, I feel like one of the benefits of my spiritual growth now that I look back in my past 3 years has been this appreciation of understanding meanings of things that happen in life. And then the discernment of meanings leads to the recognition of values. And as we have talked about in the previous courses, when you can recognize values, it allows you to make decisions, because you can make decisions and choices in your daily life based on what is aligned with the higher values, and these values lead to your ideals. And when you make choices in congruence and in alignment with higher values, you are going to lead a life of happiness, of peace, and power and progress. Because you're aligned with what is real, you're aligned with what is true, and because the law of attraction is always active and always working, it will manifest your reality based on that. And so it comes to, first, you recognize what your real needs are, leads to prayer. Prayer allows you to pray for meanings and understanding. Grasping meanings leads to the comprehension of values, and values leads to the creation of ideals, and those ideals help you make the daily decisions and choices that lead to a life of getting you what you want and avoiding what you do not want. All right. And so those 7 agencies that help create this is sincerity, prayer. And today we're going to talk about worship, a little bit about cooperation, study, fellowship, and completion. As I went back, I realized that study is actually first. I realized study is first, and all of us, the reason why we're here taking this course and the reason what makes this course valuable to us is because we've done so much study. It is the idea that we have been studying that's led us here. And so, but we'll still talk about study next week with cooperation, and then fellowship and completion, which fellowship and completion, even study, really are the means which you are able to distribute your growth and the blessings of your spirituality. All right. Any questions about the new interpretation or the new verbiage or wordage for the 7 agencies of personal religion? Did that help y'all understand better why we have these 7 agencies? And did it help you? Did it enhance? Does these new wording or did this new phrase or definitions enhance your understanding of the 7 agencies better? Or is it neutral?
It's better. I understand it better.
Okay. Jessica, were you raising your hand? Oops.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Okay. All right. Anybody else add anything better, new, same, about the same?
I really like it. I think it's an improvement as well. Like it's really clear.
Good. Good. That's what I was aiming for. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. Okay. Well, let's talk about worship. Oh, let's talk about meaning and values. So I really today was trying so hard to jump into worship, but I was constantly feeling I was interrupted by the Spirit to clarify deeper on meanings and values. And because this course is an ongoing, evolving course with my own spirit guide, as well as your spirit guides, I feel like I had to be obedient. So let's talk about deeper into what it means to discern meanings. And the best example, today was so interesting because I truly was striving to get to talk about worship, but I was feeling so interrupted that I needed to clarify more understanding on meanings and values. And the best idea that came to me, that was shown to me, was in regarding past lives, past life readings, and soulmates from the Edgar Cayce material. Edgar Cayce always stressed this. People always came to Edgar Cayce's in the 20s and 1910s for past life readings. And there's a quote that I could not exactly find the exact wording of that quote, but he says, listen, it is not useful for you just to find out who you were in such and such and such a time to realize you're buried there under this tree and you did such and such and such. He kept focusing on if you cannot make the meaning, if you can't get the meaning of what that past life has to do with your present life, it has no value to you and there's no use of you trying to discover what it is. And he stressed that the importance of anybody's past life is only how they can make meaning of it in your current life. And then from that meaning of it, you can find a value now that you can make different decisions in the present moment that can lead you to better outcomes and a better future. So the example I got was about soulmates, right? So, and this is a definition. So Edgar Cayce said the meaning of a soulmate, or what a soulmate is a soulmate is an ongoing connection with another individual that the soul picks up again in various times and places over lifetimes. So for Edgar Cayce, he defined a soulmate not as romantic. For him, soulmates were not romantics. It was a ongoing, continual connection that you have between people that you keep picking up over time. And then over here, even though I put value, it really is, he defined a meaning of a soulmate. Even though I listed it with value, it's really a meaning. But he put, we are attracted to another person at a soul level, not because that person is our unique complement. That would be what I think is a twin flame. But because by being with that individual, we are somehow provided with an impetus to become our whole selves. And so from that, you can discern when you know the meaning of why a person is in your life or has come in your life, that leads to you assigning a value to that person, which you then can make choices on how to engage with them, how to make choices to value that relationship, engage in that relationship, from that. So again, the titles are mixed up here, but it would more so be you define what a soulmate is, and then you find the meaning behind it. The meaning is the soulmate allows you to become your whole self. And from that, it leads to you creating a value for that person, for that individual. And then from that value of that individual in your life, you're able to make appropriate decisions on how to continue to engage with them and how to manage your behavior and manage your behavior with that person. So meaning leads to value, but it's not just enough just to know, oh, okay, that was my soulmate, or blah, 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 this is who this person is, or that's what I did in this lifetime. It's about getting meaning from it, discerning the meaning from it, and then from that meaning, discerning value. All right, does that make sense? Or am I somewhat articulating, does that analogy of soulmates and past lives give you a better understanding of what it means by discerning meanings and finding values?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about some more about values. Life without meaning and values. Life without meanings and value, it equals change without growth. And change without growth may sound ironic or paradoxical, but what it means is that you can keep changing, right? There's a quote someone put on Instagram or Facebook a long time ago. It said, you can change your friends as much as you change your clothes. But if you have not changed, nothing is changing in your experience with these different people. Okay? So you can change your environment, you can change your lifestyle, you can change, but but that doesn't mean that you're growing. Growth comes when you are able to distill the meaning from your experiences that you're having. When you can understand what is the meaning of this relationship. What was the meaning of what happened to me in high school, middle school? What was the meaning of that? You keep, without discerning meanings, you keep accumulating experiences. You don't get appreciation for your experiences, and you just keep needing more and more experiences. And what happens is, the paradox is you keep having all these experiences without distilling the meaning of them, and it leads to you actually missing out on so much life. And what happens is we think that we need to have so many experiences, but a person who has had so many experiences, right, but they have yet to get any meaning out of any of those experiences, they're actually missing out on so much life. Okay? Have you ever taken a trip somewhere, okay, and you come back from that trip to some profound place, and for you, it was transcendental, or you got so much meaning out of it, and you're sharing with a person, they say, oh, I went to that same place. I did that same thing. And they're like, really? That's like, oh, I never paid that attention. Or you did that. And when you find out you went there, and they're like, oh my God, I've been there 6 times. I grew up there. And you're like, really? And you didn't get this and you didn't experience it? They're like, no. And you're like, oh my God, how could you have gone there and not got that? Can any of y'all ever experienced anything like that before? And so, or it's like people who you've maybe as a child, you grew up going to an amusement park. But once you get all you get from that amusement park, you don't ever want to go to that amusement park again, right? For some people, they need one time at Disney World, right? And that's it. Other people go every year and over again. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for when you can really be able to distill meaning out of experience, it gives you that experience and it adds to your life in ways that it allows you to give appreciation, and it creates value for you. It helps you understand value and appreciation and understanding versus just continually racking up experiences without distilling meaning and appreciation. And this is why some of us, we probably in our spiritual arrogance or just in our mental arrogance have judged older people when we find out they've done so much. And you feel like, you've done that? And like, yeah, your mind is saying, why don't you act like a person who's traveled here or seen that? because what they're doing is there's a possibility they're not truly getting the meaning from their experiences. And as a result, they're actually missing out on so much life. So the irony is they're saying, I don't want to miss out anything in life. I want to do everything I can do. But if you're not getting the meaning from it, you're actually ending up missing out so much on life. And by having spiritual growth produces, one of the byproducts of spiritual growth is the ability to find meaning and grasp values. And as a result, your spiritual growth would allow you to get meaning from some of the most minuscule, small situations and experiences. But from getting those meanings from those small experiences, those few experiences, you're actually getting a lifetime of value from very few experiences. And this is why sometimes if you ever meet a truly advanced spiritual growth personality, sometimes you'll be shocked at the idea that they have not done any travel. They may not have even read a lot of books. They may live a very routine life in their world. And you're like, huh, you haven't done this? But they don't need it, because if they're able to get such meaning from their bus ride, from their house to their job every day, in the people they interact with the idea of conversing with the bus driver and absorbing the experience of that conversation, looking out the window, seeing the farmer on the tractor harvest the wheat, just in that day commute, they find so much meaning that it adds so much value to them. Okay. When you think about the parables that Jesus taught, he used everyday, common, trivial life experiences of that day and age, but he made them into parables that we still use and quote today from just simple illustrations of everyday living. And that's a person who is looking at the trivial things in life, but they're able to get so much meaning and value from that. And that is one of the byproducts of spiritual growth. All right. Did that kind of give us a better, even more expand understanding of meanings and values and the purpose of spiritual growth? Okay.
Yeah.
Good. All right. So, I'm glad I got that out, because it was such a interrupted, like, Adam, you can't go to worship until you talk about this. And I was just like, I wanted to continue to just build on worship. And then I was like, you know what? I'll surrender to this, because I feel like it must be something critical for some of us. And it helped me out. It did help me out understand better. So I hope it did the same for you all.
You know, Adam, I got a quick comment. So a couple of weeks ago, I don't know what lesson we were in, but you said something about you might need to go to your high school reunion to get closure.
I did say that.
And I really heard that. Like, it just, you know how something just kind of dings, like it's like a little bell that goes off when you hear somebody say something. And that was part of the reason why I went to my reunion. And I really pressed my way to go, because that's a pretty long trip for just like a day. We just went for one day. But when I tell you, like, I had the time of my life. So, I mean, I just had so much fun. I could just tell that I was vibrating so high, and I was a little bit confused. Because when I got back, it was very hard. You know what I'm saying? You have mentioned this before, you know, in your own personal life, but it was very hard to get back into mommy mode when I got back. And I haven't ever experienced that. And it wasn't like how can I say this? It wasn't like a dreadful thing. I just couldn't switch back to not thinking about my experience. And it was so meaningful for me to be back with my friends that I really literally grew up with. Like, my kids aren't growing up with people from 6 years old through all the way, 20 years, because we moved around quite a bit. But there was a lot of meaning in that trip for me, in a lot of different ways, and it brought a lot of different emotions and memories back up. How this is, so some of these characteristics I've really had since junior high school and middle school and high school, and I needed to have those revelations. Like, I needed to be reminded that, like, some of my characteristics, like, I've really had them my whole life, and then also shown some ways that I changed, and that wasn't like a extravagant trip, right? Where I went to some island or something.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of meaning, a lot of revelation, in just those 2 days for me. So I'm really glad that you went back over meanings and values, and I'm still reflecting on some of the things I kind of heard that God showed me when I was there and when I got back.
Yeah, it sounds, Nicole, that because of your spiritual growth that's happened in your life, that trip was almost over sensory load, full of you were seeing meaning that you missed.
Yep.
And it
I mean,
triggered it. And you probably just didn't give yourself an adequate time to worship and distill what had happened.
Right. Yep.
Reflect and journal on it.
I will. I need to because it's still very, very like in my spirit, even, and it's been a week.
Yeah, and that's why down here I put the word, it ignites transcendence.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so maybe, there are other times where you were in a different space. And this is the benefit of being in the spiritual growth. Because when you do things like that out of a new perspective, it enhances it. Where there may be other people who was at that class reunion and they have not thought about it, or they say it was a good time and they're sitting there keeping it moving.
Right. Right. No, total life changer, like life-changing moment last weekend.
And it was just a high school reunion. Like you said, you didn't go to a 5-day retreat in India,
right.
Or there's something wrong with those things. But it doesn't take it. Sometimes when you're in the spiritual growth mindset, it can just be as simple running into somebody at the grocery store you haven't seen in a long time.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing.
Oh yeah.
Anybody else before we move on?
Just a quick question, not to delay too much. So I understand the idea of being present, and by being present, that's when you find the meaning. But is there like an active, conscious part that you have to do when being present to find the meaning, or does it happen on its own?
It happens on its own. It's only a byproduct of spiritual growth.
So so is there a way to get more present? Because I guess sometimes when I am just in the chaos of life and everything, and I do try to practice being present, when I'm doing that, it seems, I guess I struggle trying to see the meaning in being present. Like I'll just look around and it'll seem so monotonous. And I feel like I'm being too active in trying to find it instead of, I guess, being
it definitely can't be forced. It definitely can't be forced. And again, it's a byproduct of your spiritual growth. You can't force growth. The only thing that it's something that comes as a gift, as a benefit of your growth. But committing to these 7 agencies of study, prayer, and worship, it does enhance your spiritual growth. And then by enhancing your spiritual growth, it does allow you to be able to effortlessly find meaning and be there for meaning. But it can't be forced. You can't, if let's take, for example, at Nicole's class reunion. Let's say someone said, y'all, let's take a moment of reflection here, right? If there are individuals with no capacity for spiritual growth or the discernment, they could have meditated for 15 minutes. And that person could have told them, think back to high school, think back to the fact that we all grew up together. And they would have got out of that, somebody would have been there crying, shedding tears, had a whole born again experience. And the other person would have came out of it just like, what the hell, why y'all all crying for? Like, it can't be forced.
And I got another quick comment. So being present probably was the very first thing I learned in my practice. And it requires practice. So I'm a wife and I'm a mother of 3 children. And I would really be stressed out and overwhelmed. It would make me angry. And I would literally snap. And then I learned about being present, which means I would just focus on whatever I was doing right then. So if I was cooking dinner, that's all I was doing. I was not going to think about how I had to do laundry, how I had to help these kids with this homework. I wouldn't think about anything but cooking dinner. If I was at the grocery store, I was just going to be at the grocery store. Because my mind would go in so many different places because I had so many responsibilities. I had to learn how to be present because I would have went crazy. And I was very mean and I was very angry. And it's been like 3 years now. So when I was at that reunion, anything, I'm present. Like I did not think about my kids because there's nothing I can do. If something happened and it was like detrimental and we had to be like, okay, we got to go, then yeah, we would have had to leave. But anything else, it wasn't going to be anything I could do about it. I'm hundreds of miles away. So I was very present in my reunion, and I had a great time.
Good. Very good. So
but yeah, it's something you really got to practice.
It does start with presence and meditation. Let's talk about that. So let's talk about what is worship. So worship, there's 5 elements to worship, right? Worship is, I define worship today as the spiritual evaluations of one material life. 2, the appropriation of spiritual resources into one's material existence. Okay? So after we pray, all right, we pray, we ask God, help us grow. We go through something, or we're just praying because our daily chore, we made it a loyalty that we have. We pray, we ask for wisdom, guidance, growth, blessings. But sometimes in the meantime can be a mean time, all right? Anybody know that? Anybody ever experienced that? The meantime, somebody say, we're just waiting in the meantime. But sometime between a prayer request and looking for the answer, it can be a mean time. This is where worship, that's where worship needs to be applied and appropriated. Worship is also an adjustment of consciousness to open up to the spiritual forces, okay? And it's also a process of release and realignment. And worship is normally always prefixed by prayer and followed up with cooperation, okay? So if prayer, because you're always in the habit of praying, it's what I've noticed. It's hard to get into a true state of worship without having already said that prayer. Okay. It's like if you think about a relationship with your lover, you got to have some type of exchange, conversational exchange. The old people back in the day used to grow up. If you used to walk in one of my neighbor's house growing up, the old people, if you just walked in that house and you didn't say anything to them, you would get cussed out, right? Some of you may remember this. They say, I didn't wake up with you this morning. You better say hello to me. You just can't go in a person's house and begin engaging with them without addressing everyone there and saying hello, good morning, blah, blah, blah. So prayer is like that conversation of talking, communicating, invoking. But worship is the engagement, is the action of being engaged, of aligning yourself to receive and to begin the process of, I guess it's like sex, you have that exchange. You're going to take place now, where prayer is you're talking and you're setting the atmosphere. And then worship is always followed by some active engagement of cooperation, we'll talk, and that's what we're going to go over today. All right. And I use this image here because I see that worship is like this. It's like a big magnifying glass looking into your life, but from the spiritual perspective. But it's looking into every single area and detail of your human experience and material life. All right, so let's keep it moving right along. All right, so requirements of worship. Meditation. Meditation is basically what Jayla and Nicole were bringing up, being present. All right, I don't have to elaborate on meditation. There's no one enrolled in this course that doesn't know what it means to meditate and to be present. Sincerity. This may be overlooked, but we talked about sincerity. It's not just about being still and being present, but it's also being truthful with yourself and coming out of place of being sincere with your intention, your thoughts, actions to yourself, about yourself. And then again, being patient, being present, and meditating is all about having patience. Tools for help when it comes to worship is journaling. Journaling is a way that you can be sincere. Journaling is a way that you're reflecting on your life from a spiritual perspective. It can be. If you're just not dictating, oh, I did this today. But if you do it in the form of journaling from a higher perspective, starting with thank you. Thank you for this today. Thank you for the experience. Writing the questions. What did it mean when this happened? Journaling your dreams. The tarot. The tarot is a great way for worship because the tarot, the Universal Weight Rider Tarot deck, it's pictures and symbols of our human experience from a spiritual perspective. And so whenever you're engaging in using tarot, you're automatically thinking about the higher perspective and a higher evaluation of your incidences and your daily life situations. If you're using it based on the historical meanings, or if you're using it based on if you're applying the tarot from how it was the intention of the metaphysical spiritual illustrations of the cards. If you're using it for fortune telling, not so much a help for worship. Music. There are frequencies that come through music that automatically put you in an introspective, contemplative, evaluative manner, that you begin to reflect and think about your life, think about your situation, look out upon the world. Have you ever been walking through the city or walking somewhere and your song is on and everything it's like you're watching a music video? People seem to be moving in slow motion. The leaves seems to be falling. You know, that ballad plays in your headphones and everything just becomes transcendent experience. And then as soon as that music stops, you lose it. So music is a great tool for getting you in that spiritually evaluative place, contemplative place. And there's others. Can anybody think of any other forms of tools that help with worship and getting us meditative, contemplative, introspective, and putting us in a state of patience? I'm sure I missed many. Anybody want to add any?
I roller skate, but I know this like subjective.
Well, roller skating is meditative. This came to me as I asked that aromatherapy. Is there anybody that practices aromatherapy really strongly in their life?
I do. Those diffusers, using those essential oils definitely work.
Mm-hmm.
And candles. Mm-hmm.
So yes. So there's many things anything that puts you in the higher contemplative, evaluative state. These are great prerequisites for worship. Okay, let's talk about the spiritual evaluations of one's material life. This is kind of complicated. I'm going to keep it simple. We won't go into it deep today or in this course, but maybe in another course I'll teach. But it's basically choosing to view your everyday life situations and incidences from the higher I am perspective. And the I am perspective is that perspective in which the situations, experiences, and your emotions are happening through you, not to you. Okay? This is best illustrated and talked about and discussed in the book by Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. Okay? It's how to separate who you are from the experiences happening through you. That's worship. Worship is when you are evaluating what's happening to me. You are the space in which the emotion, the anger, the irritations, the upsetness, the longings, the wants are happening. And when you make a conscious effort to identify with that larger I am perspective, you're basically switching your identification to the being who is happening to the being that is happening through. That is one of the aspects of worship. It allows you to have a different spiritual evaluation of what's going on. It's an appropriation of spiritual goods, okay? There is a lot of spiritual nourishment that is available, but it has to be obtained and seized by the human mind and appropriated, okay? Spiritual light and spiritual goods, I call them the inner resources. And if those who've been coming to some of my weekly classes hear me speak on the inner resources a lot, there are truly riches in heaven that we can access and bring into our living experience. One of the most beautiful poetic phrases in the Judeo-Christian Bible is from the book of Isaiah in chapter 63. It says, God promises to give unto them beauty for ashes, oil for the joy of mourning, and the garment of praise in the place of spirit of heaviness. So whenever we're in that in the meantime place of we pray and ask God about help us with our conflict of our marriage, our household financial struggles, our vocational career struggles. but there's still a heaviness on us. There's still some type of mourning over the relationship that we lost, the brokenheartedness. We prayed, we asked God to heal it. We know it's going to be resolved, but in the meantime, it's a meantime. In those mean times is when you need to appropriate those spiritual resources. If you're brokenhearted and you're longing for intimacy and connection, you can actually go in your spiritual resource center and appropriate those goods to the part of your energy system that is in need of it. That's another form of worship, appropriation of those spiritual goods. If you are lacking, if you're feeling lonely, which a lot of us people who are single and some of us who aren't single, we still feel lonely. We crave deep connection, intimacy. We can get it through worship. We can, if we make the time to appropriate those goods into those areas of our lives that we need. All right. Again, like I said, here's just more illustration. In the meantime, you pray for help. You requested intervention of the divine to grant you wisdom and understanding. But in the meantime, your chemical, emotional body needs release and realignment. If you have ever studied chiropractic or the philosophy, the base of chiropractic is based on the idea of vitalism. So a chiropractic adjustment, true chiropractic is based on the idea that your body can heal itself from whatever situation it's going through if the information from the brain can be passed to the system nerves in the body. But in order for that to happen, the spine has to be correctly aligned. Any misalignment in the spine interferes with that communication, and the interference of that communication interferes with those messages or those signals being sent to heal the different parts of your body. And so chiropractic is about aligning the body, aligning the nervous system, so information of the body can naturally go through you so your body can heal itself. And worship is that. Worship is, okay, you pray, you ask for help, but now you got to have that emotional release. You got to release some things that's keeping you stressed. And so worship allows you to get that release, that chemical emotional release that's keeping you bound. And you do that by appropriating the inner resources or appropriating the spiritual goods. It's also an adjustment of your attitude. Believe it or not, and Leslie illustrated this when she was sharing, the answer to your prayers are asked before you even ask them. It's just that the prayer and worship realigns your attitude to help you receive the answer. And then you realize, wait a second, I know the answer to this. Wait a second, look, here's some things right now that you weren't paying attention to before. So all of your prayers are going to be answered and can be found through the adjustment of your attitude. So even if you're praying, but if you're not adjusting your attitude through worship, you still may miss the prayer or miss the answer, miss the solution, miss finding the meaning and the value. Worship helps adjust that attitude. It's a process of release and realignment that I spoke about earlier. Release. There are narratives that keep us stuck. These narratives keep us stuck, and they're thoughts that come in that allow us to stay in the same old patterns over and over and over and over and over again. Worship is a process of recognizing those narratives and releasing those narratives. And then it's a process of alignment because you're releasing those old narratives and you're releasing your identification with the old identity of this shit always happens to me. This is my life story. This is what's happened to this is my genetic collective conscious identity. We've always struggled with this. And now you can realign through worship with a new higher identity of your true higher self. And that alignment, that release of those old narratives and that alignment with a higher identity is going to better prepare you to receive the wisdom, the spiritual growth, the adjustment that you need to appropriate the spiritual resources and also answer your prayers. And then through worship, you receive all these beneficial spiritual nourishment. You get the blessing that you ask for. You get the wisdom. it is followed up by cooperation. And cooperation is joining in the operation of the ministry of other people's angels, their higher self, their spirit guides, that's answering their prayer requests. You're now going to make yourself willing to be a willing agent to be a part of what's happening in somebody else's life. When we pray and ask for material blessings or even spiritual blessings of values, normally the agents of God are going to come through other people, right? Either the wisdom, the wording, the material blessing. You get to be a willing participant in the blessings of other people once you have got your intended spiritual nourishment. So worship is always followed up with some form of cooperation where you recognize, I see what God is doing in the world. I see what he's doing in other people's lives around me. And I'm now going to make myself a willing part to be a part of that person's life and be a part of what the God or the divine is doing in their life through cooperation. All right. We are ending on worship right at 11 o'clock. It's not quite 11 o'clock, but those were the key components of worship. I do have an additional presentation that for those who want to remain on can learn my personal worship, but I didn't want to make that a main part of the course because, again, this is create your personal religion. And I really want to respect other people's plan and their needs for worship. So before we move into my worship process that I was willing to share with you all, is there any questions about these 5 places or ideas of worship? Y'all are all quiet today. Let's just review them again. The spiritual evaluation of life, appropriation of resources, an adjustment of consciousness, a process of release and realignment, and then it's followed up by cooperation. Any of these 5 that I need to go back, clarify, you want to add comment to, get understanding on?
So I do. I know that for me, like when we're discussing meanings versus values, I think it comes like pretty natural, but I tend to kind of get stuck too much in the meaning. And so the action portion, which I guess maybe is the cooperation aspect that I guess we get to later, is, you know, something I struggle with. But number 2, the appropriation of spiritual resources into one's material existence, that in the meantime, which that was clever. I know like at the Enlightenment, you know, festival, it was coming up a lot, like, you know, like being more grateful and getting bitter and that patience factor, and also not doing enough, you know? So like, I think sometimes I can get caught up in like, oh, you know, I'm doing my worship, but it's like, but you got to do even more, like kind of like a full on belief, full faith, no doubt. And, you know, there's that constant dance of going a little bit into the cooperation and like, I shouldn't be doing that. So hide back away, and then limiting the work and the allowing of the angels to, you know, do their work. So I guess my question is really like, are there any, do you have any tips on that? Do you know what I'm kind of talking about in that? Is that just getting stuck, like not in enough, or is that more prayer? Or I don't know if I'm being clear, but.
I think 2 things that I heard. One, you might be getting lost in the meanings because of meanings. After meanings is discerning values. So meaning is just not the end goal to discover the meaning of something. Okay. Let's go back to the example of past life readings. Okay. So now you know the meaning of that relationship. All right. This was your husband was your servant in another lifetime, and now you got to learn how to treat him better. Okay. That may be the meaning of it that you got, but now what value are going to be distilled? And so the value that you're now learning is that humility, right? How to be self-effacing sometimes. Put yourself last. You see value in putting yourself last. So it's not just discovering the meaning, but it's also getting the value from the meaning. And that comes from engagement with life. And that does come from some form of service and taking action. Because what happens is, like any type of college program, skill that you're learning, vocational training, you have to, there are certain things that you will only get when it comes to learning skills by actually doing the skill. Okay? Values are actually best. I don't even know if they're best. I think values are mostly grasped through the application of action. Because it's in the action, it's in the going into the work, doing the action, doing the work, doing the cooperation. And from that, you get another experience that you're then able to discern with the contrast of, and you grasp value out of it. Versus just sitting back, continuing to be an what they call an armchair researcher. Okay? It's just nothing like actually getting into, you can go to pilot school, but I'm sure studying being an airplane pilot is so different from actually being flying the plane itself with actual passengers. And so there's a part of it that you're only going to get from being in active service. Personally, I have gotten so much more understanding, comprehension of spiritual growth, spiritual meanings and values by actively engaging in doing the Enlightened Collective, being a spiritual advisor, creating this course, versus than just me being isolated in my world, studying, praying, and doing my own worship. Something becomes real when I actually start this course. Make myself available to be a teacher. Make myself available to be criticized, rebuked. Something becomes real when I start the willingness to make myself available to hold a space, to build a space for other people to grow spiritually, to start engaging with other egos, other interpersonal conflicts. Something becomes real, and then it forces me to go back and get and distract real applicable values. You can just sit back and study all day, you get lost in meaning. But when you're on that front line and going that work, it's going to make that stuff real. You're going to exercise it out, and you're going to even grasp, you're truly going to grasp values and understandings. There's things that I got now when it comes to ministry, group, fellowship, that I may have read 6 years ago, but now that I've been engaged in this course, in the Enlightened Collective, in small groups, I got on a whole nother level that I got. It's like mine. You can't take away my experience from the past 4 years of what I've been doing. That adds even more true value and meaning to it. I read about being a spiritual mentor back in 2005, but it wasn't until I started actually actively helping people along in their spiritual growth that I get it on a whole nother level now. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I hope it adds some more color to it.
No, it really does. And I mean, the emphasis on the values, kind of what's been the theme on all of this, right? And the sincerity, I suppose, of that, right? And so back to what you were saying at the beginning of the class, like if I have like certain values, then like, for example, my fear of criticism, it'd be like, okay, girl, well, you'll be homeless in the car and people gotta look at you for a little minute, but like, what are you headed towards, right?
Yes.
I hear you. Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay. Who is that? Jessica?
Yeah. So I know in your first video, you said something about back in the day or in another age group that people used to worship stones. Do you think that humanity as a collective will get back to that worshiping stones or, you know, like trees and things like that?
It's always a possibility. That would be a de-evolution, though.
Okay.
That would be a de-evolution, but there's always a possibility of reverting back. But that would be a de-evolution of worshiping creation versus the creator.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Well, my question was, as far as we were talking about appropriating spiritual resources, can you give commentary on the origin of spiritual resources? Like, does that come from the study? And then how, like, can you give examples of what spiritual resources are that, like, I guess we have to be able to appropriate practice and worship?
And I'm going to talk about this in the next part for those who stay attuned. But the spiritual resources, or the inner resources, or the spiritual resources, are those things that our body, our spiritual circuits, our soul craves. It's those things we get from the presence of God that we're really craving. Take, for example, you may be longing on your human level, you're longing for intimacy and companionship. All right, is mammals. It is part of being a mammal that you require intimacy and touch, right? If you notice puppies, dogs, lions, whatever the animal is, they are always on top of each other, right? They're always connected. It's part of our survival as mammals and human nature. Well, certain circumstances sometimes in life prevent us from having those things in ways where without compromising who we are. And in those times, what you're craving is deep intimacy, deep connection. And you can actually get that from the presence of God. So I guess a better term for spiritual resources would be the presence of God. And the presence of God has been able to sustain mankind through all types of unfathomable hardships and circumstances. And the presence of God can give you anything that you need. The presence of God could truly be peace in the midst of chaos. It could be intimacy, love when you're being rejected. It could bring you joy in the midst of being in prison. There's all types of historical stories of people who were in the midst of physical destitution, physical suffering, but they connect to that presence of God and they glowed. Right? They glowed. Their bodies, their stomachs, and their physical things were nourished, upkept from the inside out. So that is appropriation of spiritual resources. And I guess now that you've asked that question, I guess the best phrase may be the appropriation of the presence of God.
And how can I consciously appropriate that in the meantime?
In the meantime, that's what I'm going to do in this next step. So I'm going to stop recording for now.